Hello everyone and welcome. It might be a little bit too late, but I have one more Halloween card for you. In my last video I mentioned I was thinking about painting a tree and I could not get that thought out of my head, so that's what I'm doing in this video. Plus I'm also doing a cool distress ink blending. Let's get quickly through the supplies. For the blending I picked 5 distress ink colors: Black Sooth, Ground Espresso, Rusty Hinge, Tea Dye and Dry Marigold. If you don't have distress inks, you can use any other inks that blend well, or you can also use watercolors. For the blending, I'm using this brush. It's a cheap makeup brush. My cardstock is the Canson XL watercolor paper. I like to use it when I'm distress ink blending. And to paint the tree silhouette, I'm going to be using a pencil to draw it first. And for the actual painting, I'm going to be using a black gouache. Originally, I wanted to use an alcohol marker, but it felt very dry. I started with the lightest color, the Dry Marigold. This is going to be the color at the bottom, but to make the blending easier, I started from the top, and I will flip it when I will be blending the other colors. I covered more than half of the panel using this ink, and then I switched it to the tea dye ink. And here I started creating an arch. This layer will be like a guide. Here I didn't spend too much time, I just applied the color lightly. The next thing I used is the Ground Espresso. I skipped the Rusty Hinge I will be using when I'm gonna go back from the darkest to the lightest. And again, I was creating an arch. You can see it's not perfect application because, as I said, it's just the first layer. I will be coming back with more ink later. And lastly, on the top and a little bit on the edges of the panel, I used the Black Sooth ink. I think it makes it more interesting to add a little bit of black. And here I also applied it a little bit more saturated. Right now it looks a little bit like a hot mess, but I will be blending in more color in a bit. However, before I can do that, I had to do a little bit of cleaning. I cleaned my laminated cardstock, which I like to use when I'm working with distress inks. And I also had to clean my brush. As I said in my previous video, I only have one of those brushes, so I have to clean it between each ink, especially when going from dark to light, and it's really annoying. So moving on, I applied the next layer. I first started with the Ground Espresso, and I was trying to blend it with the Black Sooth as much as possible. And also I intensified the pressure when applying the color, so it's more intense. Next, I used the Rusty Hinge and I was blending it in with the Ground Espresso. I think these inks mix together very well. The next color was the Tea Dye, and again I was blending it with the color before, the Rusty Hinge in this case, and I didn't apply it as low as I originally planned because I didn't want it to be too dark since the tree is going to be black. And lastly, I applied the Dry Marigold again. I really like the blending results, and if you like it as well, don't forget to hit that like button. I also like how I got the idea for this card. When I was looking up how to paint a spooky tree, I stumbled across this image on Pinterest. The tree was way too complicated, but the background looked very similar to an ink blending I did for a card, and this is the card. I haven't released this card yet, but it inspired my blending. I really like that I was inspired by my own card. Anyways, let's paint the tree. I first let the panel dry, and after it was dry, I squeezed the paint onto a palette. As I said, this is a gouache, and except of having a damp brush, I'm not adding any additional water. I started with the ground, and I just painted it all black, very simple. And then with my pencil, I drew a main outline of the tree. I'm not going to show you all of it because you will not see it, but you can see it a little bit in this picture. And then I started following the shape and filling it with the black paint. The easiest way to paint or draw the shape of the tree, well, at least for me, is to start with the trunk. I also made the trunk a little bit skewed, and then I painted 2 main branches that split at the top of the trunk. But you can also start with just 1 branch. And after that, I was adding additional branches. Some of them I pre-drawn, others I painted freehand. The good thing when drawing the branches with a pencil, if you make a tiny mistake, you can always paint over it with a gouache. branches on the right side, but then I stopped because another thing I also wanted to paint is a raven sitting on the tree. And the reason why I stopped painting the branches is because I needed to have enough space for the raven, so I painted him first before adding additional branches. I practiced a bit drawing the raven. I was trying to get the right shape. I had troubles mainly with the beak. On my trial piece it looked like a duck. So I decided to trace the one I liked the most. I first traced the drawing onto a light, sort of see-through paper. Then I covered the back with the graphite of the pencil, and then I placed the paper on top of the panel with the tree, and I went over the outline with my pencil, transferring the raven image onto the cardstock. By the way, if you have a printer, you don't have to draw the raven or even the tree. You can find an image online, print it in correct size, and trace that. After I painted the raven, I painted a few additional branches here and there, just to fill up the empty spaces. And the tree is done. If you would like to see still pictures, just hop over to my blog. You can leave it as it is, but I wanted to add a few more Halloween things to it. I might have been influenced by the photo I showed you earlier. That one has pumpkins on the floor, which is a little bit too complicated for me. I wanted to paint something much easier, so I decided to paint a graveyard. This is very simple. I painted a gravestone and some crosses, and that's it. The painting is done. You can leave it as it is, just adhere it to a card base, but I decided to add a sentiment. I used a small Happy Halloween sentiment stamp and I stamped it and heat embossed it onto a black cardstock, and I attached it using foam squares. On the back of the panel with the tree, I attached a simple double-sided tape and I adhered it onto the card base that I made using a craft cardstock. And the banner with the sentiment I adhered on the left side of the tree. Also, if you have a black foam adhesive, I would recommend using that. If you would like to see more Halloween card ideas, check out my playlist with all of my Halloween cards. And if you like this video, I would really appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe, because I still have few autumnal cards for you, and then I'm starting with Christmas cards. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.